Welcome to another episode of Simply Thriving in the North with your hosts, Auroara Leigh and Brent Goerz. And we have Misia Slugocki on with us today, and we're going to be talking about more aspects of generational cycle healing. Welcome, Misia.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, so you've come on and been a guest before in the different series that I have, and so happy that you're coming on again because, you know, the conversation was so rich. And I'm curious where we explore. And I know you two know each other already as well.
Yes.
So it should be a great conversation. So where should we plunge into? Maybe the shallow part, and we'll slowly
introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about kind of your journey and where you're at and how you got here.
Yeah, I kind of started off in nursing and then kind of wanted to go into the kind of more psych nursing field and moved back to BC and kind of took a more social work approach into the field of where I was going, and now working with mental health and addiction recovery. So, and I think that's where I really connect, and I think I see a lot of those facets within my own family and the generations of trauma that have been kind of implemented in that.
That whole backstory, yeah, exactly, because it's like some people who get into this field are called.
Yes, yeah.
Right? And unfortunately, the calling card sometimes sucks.
Yeah. Spot on.
If we could...
Well, yeah, you learn to fix your car because your own car is broken, so then you're a mechanic for others, but because you've learned how to fix your own car.
Yeah. And hopefully you get to the point in your life where you can afford a decent car that you're not fixing all the time.
Yes, yeah.
Ooh, nice metaphor.
And not running beside others with then you have an unfixed car and yours is now good, and you're like, come on.
You're wanting to tow their car.
Yes, don't tow that.
Without any gasoline.
Yes, yeah.
You're not a tow truck.
Boundaries, those strong boundaries setting in place too.
As a woman, don't be a tow truck.
Yes.
Well, we're nurturers though, so there's this natural desire to nurture. Yeah. But I think, and what I witness is that women don't want to continue to carry what they're like men aren't carrying.
But there's a difference, and for me, I see that in terms of, and that's where I'm saying boundaries, is that we are nurturers, but we go sometimes too far beyond that.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to fix those.
Well, tell me, and I don't know if we're going to get into it this deep, this quick, but it's like the difference between nurturing and fawning.
Dependency, yeah.
Yeah.
Like the trauma response of fawning, because if somebody comes from a childhood place of not so nice things, right? That's where you learn the fawning adaptive response to kind of survive your childhood. But then...
it's a lot of times that stems from not fixing our own trauma internally, right? So if we haven't fixed that trauma within ourselves, then that's where we fawn.
Yeah.
And we don't set boundaries. We don't, right? We continue to want to fix everybody else, and yet kind of distance ourselves from our
define fawning. Sorry, we're just having this conversation as if it's secondhand nature, but I'm sure some of our viewers are kind of going,
what is this? Yeah. Where we're constantly trying to please the other person. We're constantly trying to, dote on them, but in an unhealthy way, not a healthy pattern, right? So it's
coming from childhood where your environment's not safe.
Yeah.
But you actually need that environment for a roof over your head and food in your belly. And so you're caught in this catch-22, right?
Yeah. So I see it as a hypo-freeze response, because fawn is actually, like, when you start to fawn, it's almost like a Stockholm syndrome in a way. It's gone past fight, flight. Those are no longer options.
Yes.
It's even gone past freeze.
Yeah.
Right? Or it's a mixed freeze. Yeah. And so now my next best strategy is to please in order to maybe be okay.
Yeah.
I think there's an element too that our ancestors, the women often didn't leave the men because, well, we needed them for survival too.
Right. So it didn't end at childhood. It actually had to continue on because of the hunting, the gathering, the sheltering.
Or beliefs in religion that you can't.
Right.
But there's lots of, and if you look, at anthropology's type points of view, there's lots of times where women were actually
The hunter.
the hunter and the gatherer. There's lots of evidence, in terms of women, in the Nordic countries that were also warriors.
Yeah.
And even in those societies, men still had a sacred role that was needed too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there has, for me, it's a lot of the stuff in terms of that men are the be-all, end-all is very new in terms of Western
Time frame. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the Western society.
Like serve and please men. And,
Yes, whereas, in past generations and history,
yeah.
men and women complemented each other.
Well, you look
They
at
didn't take away
you look at
from
the
each other.
agrarian state, right? And some people are still in that state, right?
Yes.
In the sense of, I grew up in the prairies, right? And so it's like a lot of ways, it's very, the easiest way to kind of do the gender lines
Yeah.
is along the gender roles, okay? But that being said, there was a time where our family farm needed an outside income. And my father had a repeated surgery on his ankle, so it couldn't be him.
Yeah.
And so it actually, it was my mom who went back to teaching. And, we had I've got a sister who's 11 years younger, right? So he was Mr. Mom, right? And had to do the cooking and a lot more of the familiar responsibilities, because it just was logical because of the circumstances, right? And so it's only when we're feeling like we're stuck in those gender roles.
Well, and we all have, things that we're good at or that we fall in line with, and why should that take away based on gender roles, right? And for me, that, if you enjoy something or you want to do something, what makes it more masculine or more feminine?
Yeah. That's the societal piece, right?
That's
the
exactly.
cultural, anthropological piece, or expectations, or religion, or bullshit.
Well, yeah. And
Growing up at hunting and fishing lodge, I had a gun just like everyone else, right? When it was like, other people projected what I should or shouldn't be doing after I entered town.
Yeah.
Right? But it's just you're just being.
Yeah.
But bringing it back to that tow truck analogy, and where we started that conversation of nurturing or over nurturing, right?
Yeah.
How do you define that for your life now?
Like dealing with such vulnerable clients who are struggling.
It's really, again, it comes down to boundaries. It's really enforcing that, that there's a time and place for those things, and that everybody's journey is their own, and you have to find that inner peace, whatever it may be. And there's going to be challenges throughout your entire life, and there's going to be triggers, and there's going to be things that are going to come up, but how do you placate them? And how do you, work on those things? And, we're imperfect beings. And so we're never going to adapt or change unless we are willing to, and how do we make those changes, and how do we set those boundaries? And, and so it's really kind of, and I say it's more unteaching than teaching when I'm,
right,
with people and trying to get them, because for so long they've been taught, and this is from my own experience as well, like just being taught, certain things or a certain way. I grew up in a very Catholic household as well, and I'm bringing it back to religion, right?
I went to Monty Python. I apologize.
Fair enough.
In my own head, my tape. So
it is it wears on people, and I find that kind of harsh stemming of religion is sometimes the worst because it's and the way it is so patriarchal.
The worst, but also
But it also has, and this is the thing, is I always tell clients, because there's so many parts of the Bible, and I went to catechism. I did years of doing this schooling, reading the Bible, all those kind of things. And my takeaway is I actually think the Bible has a lot of good guidelines.
Yeah.
Of being a decent human being.
And I'm kind of thinking back to my hospital social work kind of role.
Yeah.
Where, there's no such thing as a former Catholic, because somebody's on their deathbed and we're paging the priest on call.
Yeah.
To kind of, this is just the wrapper, kind of at the end of life, right? It's like you go back to your roots, and it may not be for the patient's sake. It might be for just one or two of the family members.
Yeah.
Right? But that's just one of the requirements, because as a Western society, we don't necessarily have good death rituals.
No, we don't.
And so if you've had something ingrained in you,
Yeah.
that actually is a comfort. That is a connection. That's a ritual that just kind of comes into place. And yes, there might be individuals, depending on their experience with the Catholic Church, that they might have to just check out.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Because of religious abuse. But for most that I saw on their deathbeds, right?
Yeah.
It was
And
like,
that's
I'm not a practiced Catholic, but you really need to call the priest on call.
Yeah.
Because I think they're...
And that's true. Like, and I witnessed that as well when working in the hospital as well.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people in palliative care, a lot of times for the family, it's like that's what they would want, or the individual themselves would revert back to that faith, their faith.
Yeah.
Right? And I think too, it stems from a lot of people. I mean, when they're getting close to death, they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a natural occurrence to want to have that sacredness.
I don't know if this is totally appropriate or not, if this is what we're going to have to edit out of the show, but it's almost like a good bettor hedges their bets.
Yeah.
Like, what harm can it do?
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes there is harm, like I said, for some people, but at other times it is that ritual. It is that comfortable sweater that a person can kind of put on. And like you said, the circle of life is such that you kind of revert back to.
Well, and I think it stems too, like even with the indigenous cultures and other cultures around the world, they all have, except for the Western culture, don't really have like anything that's profound in death.
Yeah.
Or like this sacred entity or kind of, and I think that's, until the Roman Catholic Church kind of brought, into the Western society, that's what they have and that's what they hold on to.
Right.
And then they changed so many other ways of, sacred.
Well, it comes back to sacred boundaries again, because they have a right to their faith system, just like others have a right. The issue is that they have wanted to impose that they're the only and the best way. They have completely their own right to have that, and that's sacred, and their journey and their reality of who God is sacred. But so are other people. And that's what we know through anthropology too, is like we don't look at it. We look at it in a lens like of the eagle in the sky, right? Like this is what people are choosing and wanting. And we have these abilities to have humility with that. But when the Catholic Church didn't choose humility, though, they chose dominance. And they chose to actually see people as demonic because they were so right in their mind that they caused so much horrific harm because of their belief.
And so this is the backlash. And so I guess what I'm curious about is, as a Western society, then we've kind of created this professional role because they're, for what do we do for those people who don't have kind of a priest or a pastor or, kind of a ritual? It's like, it's a death doula.
Yeah.
Right? So a person who specializes in the miscellaneous and helping people name the unnamed or how do you know what you don't know?
Yeah.
because it's not just
somebody that helps
insert-
them cross over. Yeah.
insert the kind of death ritual here.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, what's important to you? What's significant?
Yeah.
And then gathering consensus, because many situations at the hospital, it's not just a patient and one or two family members, right? You're talking about the call has gone out.
Yeah.
And now there's 12 people in the room and coming from all sorts of different backgrounds, and you're kind of feeling the energy of, are we in a consensus basis here, or is somebody just stewing to the point that they're biting their lip off, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where I think there needs to be care and attention to kind of figure out the middle ground there.
Yeah.
Or gather the consensus.
So bringing it back to nurturance again, that aspect of over nurturing, right? It actually enables then those to not take the autonomy for their own journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're creating a deficit by over nurturing.
Right.
And as healers, in the sense of social, whether it's social services, like social work or therapy or anthropology, creative, whatever the heck I am.
Whatever you're calling yourself this week.
Or game designer, like whatever it is, it doesn't matter.
Which hat?
I don't care.
Which
Lover.
hat are you wearing?
Can I just be lover?
Yes.
I'm a lover. Anyway, so like we have that bleeding heart.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Of love. And so whether we've talked about compassion fatigue or burnout, talked about all these layers like in the past shows too and in our conversations. But, that bleeding heart of love of like, but can we get that collective shared understanding amongst one another? What are we even aiming for now? Yeah, like, as this like woven blanket of mixed diversity, mixed faith systems, mixed modern society with traditional views, all of it. What's all of our shared goal? And even if we land it just in the north or just in Prince George, because really Prince George serves the north with so many for mental health addictions needs, right?
Yeah.
Well, and you're seeing people from all sorts of communities coming here for services or
that's what, exactly.
Sorry.
That's what I'm saying. So like, what is the shared view and programs, or what is the shared heart here of how to serve? And do we even know what that shared view and understanding is?
And within your organization that you currently are employed by, right? How do they define that?
I mean, collectively, it's really respecting the person and their autonomy, right? But also looking at, what their trauma is and what their cognitive functioning is too, right? Because some individuals are not able to really make those sound choices for themselves. And how do we address that, right? Because I do believe in autonomy for all. But at the same time, when they're not making those executive decisions for themselves in a healthy way, then, we do have to kind of put those boundaries in place for them, right?
How do you feel about the forced treatment centers approach?
We're going to get into the whole political discussion.
No, that's okay. That's okay, because I actually...
And I'm going to say, get out and vote on Monday, but this is already going to be viewed, so you can probably edit that out.
100%. I don't agree with forced treatment, but I do agree with tertiary care. And the reason... So tertiary care is basically forced care, right? Where they're forced in therapy. And a lot of times it's locked down and stuff like that. It eventually leads to naturally going into treatment, or because a lot of times a majority of those people are very vulnerable. Mm-hmm. They're, they may have other issues stemming from not just addiction issues, but trauma. They may have most of them have some sort of mental health issue, whether it's, ADHD, autism, whether it's, bipolar disorder. And, they're a lot of times addiction, they are trying to feed
self-medication.
Self-medication piece. So for me, it's really a safeguard for them, because if we just keep them vulnerable, and we're seeing the implications of closing down Riverview. Riverview.
Probably 30 years later, or whatever it has been.
Yeah, well, 2012 was when they fully shut
down.
But in 2002 is when they started not taking in people.
Yeah.
So it took 10 years to get rid of a bunch of people, and now we're seeing the dire effects of that. And we're seeing more people
the structure, right, where they were provided the structure and a safe space.
And, there's a lot of people that will say that it saved their lives. And it's not for some people, it would be a lifetime safeguard, for somebody such as my cousin, actually two of my cousins, it's a place that they would need. And I strongly support that.
Yeah.
Because it keeps them safe. It keeps them away from people that can manipulate, because they are so vulnerable. But forcing treatment on people when you're not addressing the trauma, that I don't agree with.
And that takes us into kind of that trauma sensitive, trauma awareness type of care, culturally safe, all of those kind of buzzwords.
Yeah.
But is it really happening? Because you and I hear the stories of it not.
Yes, yeah.
Of the abuses.
Yeah.
Well, so do I. Yeah.
Sorry.
I live it with people around that I care about. Right?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And it's devastating.
Yeah.
When people fall through the cracks, but also there isn't the community-led approach of love and connection.
Right.
Because humans aren't just going to heal because they're given the option to have a weekly counseling appointment. They're going to go back into whatever petri dish environment they're in, and their only answer is this counselor's card. Their only answer is actually 2 months from now, you can see the doctor, who can then get you on the wait list to see a care team, which they can then get you on a wait list to the treatment center that you're willing to go to right now.
Or you're not serious enough now, you'll never get it, or it's going to be a year or 12, 14 months.
But then when they're unmotivated at this stage, they're blamed.
Oh, yeah.
They're blamed that now they're unmotivated, or now their hopelessness is set in.
And that's why I don't believe in forced treatment, because there's so many that have made the steps or tried to make the steps, and then fall through the cracks. And even in my own field, and I'm sure with Brent as well, like, we also have wait lists, and and it's hard and it's frustrating, and it's and you want to get to everybody, but you also realize that you'll burn out as well.
But it's because we're socially broken. We don't have a social structure that's actually conducive to community wellness right now.
Yeah.
And so what do we need to do, while still honoring the systems that we have in place, but there needs to be a giant shift.
Well, and I think the political piece here, if we take it back to Riverview, the difference between centralized care and community-based care. And there's a whole conversation with regards to the resources actually didn't follow in the same ways into the communities. And so they were then underfunded.
Yes.
Those programs were underfunded because, like you said, there still are residential mental health places, but there's not enough of them.
Yes, and we're not there's not enough places equipped to help the individuals, and we're seeing it, and then they're being kicked out of not just they're being kicked out of shelters. They're being kicked out of standard, community living. They're being kicked out of, right, because they're not, the people that are working in these environments are not equipped to handle these individuals that are. So on one
trauma informed.
or be trauma informed, and then now we have all these individuals that are banned from everywhere, and not just banned from one community, but banned from several communities. And what kind of purpose do we serve?
Wow.
Right? So then now we have an issue of how do we keep this person safe?
That was welcome to my burnout journey right there.
Yeah.
Working in Emerge, where it's just like, can you go fix this problem? You know, being directed by the doctor. And it's like,
Yeah.
you gather the information, you go talk to the client, and it's just like trench foot, you know, so immediate medical need, but doesn't need to be in the hospital, booted out of every shelter.
Yeah.
But then you dig deeper and you go, oh, because, you know, an ACEs score of 8 or 9, you know, in the sense of that's where the emotional dysregulation is coming from, is a total place of childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And it's 7 o'clock at night on a Friday night. And I'm supposed to fix this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if care providers also have unhealed trauma, they don't have the fire pit to maintain the fire too that you're trying to maintain for their lack of fire pit. So we need those people that are regulated and solid. But that's where like I talked about in the previous episode, my sacred anger at the people who have the power to shift and create policies or create the container that's broader for us to all actually focus on what needs to truly be focused on. So we're focusing on the fire and not the smoke all the time.
Yeah, I like that.
And we're creating that, because I've sat in meetings in Vancouver where people were talking about budgets for like millions and millions of dollars and how to help destigmatize like youth mental health. And where the conversation was going, I could just so clearly see it's all in the smoke. And so my grief, I just went and cried at the ocean, because when there is the opportunity to make great change, and we can create that change by treating the fire, it's not happening because the level of knowledge isn't there for those decision makers.
Or if you do discuss it with those decision makers, you're brushed off. And that's another piece, right?
But also given the fact, you know, I played around with politics for a whole 4 months.
I remember that.
Recognize, you know, there's some systemic things, even with some really good political parties, where, you know, there's really good ideas out there, but the whole, if I can call it the game of politics, right? And having to get reelected, or, you know, kind of having 4-year mandates or all of that.
So the entrenched values are still from disconnection, not feeling, not going to what truly needs to serve in order for a population to heal.
Yeah.
And we have to care enough for that population to heal to go, okay, what do we actually need to do? And what do we actually need to focus on? Which is, again, that violence piece, or that high ACE scores, or those sexual abuse pieces, right? The real, true, hard stuff that is so avoided.
Right. And when can you be part of change? Like, I remember almost 20 years ago, kind of teaching a trauma course in continuing ed up at UNBC. And it was for people who are in the field. And so I did some research as far as who are these people? Well, these are the frontline staff who are, you know, didn't have the time or the circumstances to kind of get to the BSW or whatever, but they want kind of a certification in you know, addictions and mental health. And so here's this expedited kind of process to kind of give people more hands-on skills. And it was a fantastic experience, because it was an intensive. It was a course in 5 days, 8 hours a day. I mean, it almost killed me talking about trauma for 40 hours in 1 week. But it was incredible, because some of those students forged a friendship that I still continue with to this day, and have seen them grow within the community and take on more responsibility because of that leadership, right? Because, I mean, as you know, sometimes it's not convenient to get, you know, certain letters after your name, because you're having to put a roof over your head and you're having to kind of support your family. And we had a conversation earlier on with some of our other guests, is is that really important anyways? Because when I first met you, you were a social worker. Like, like having coffee, hearing your story, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing social work.
Yeah.
Like you said, I went from nursing to social work. You know, yes, I can't be a registered social worker because I, don't have this, that, and the other. But we're still going to get you a master's degree, and we're still working on that.
So Carrier Sekani is opening a working center next year, right? So what are the plans for that and the care approach for that?
So, I mean, it's going to be like where we do the detox on site. So they have nurses, and we actually are doing that at Ormond Lake currently. And I think it's such a fantastic approach because, it's so hard to get people into detox and then into treatment and when they're ready. And it is that step, right? And it's so frustrating because we have people that are ready and willing and wanting to go, and then the system is so broken.
Yeah, you keep calling every morning at this time, and we'll tell you if there's a bed.
Yeah, and it's not always the right approach for people as well, and people have good experiences in detox and they have bad, and.
Sure.
Well,
what do they say?
My friend is a medicine woman, and she was talking about, that there was always warriors that you could detox. You don't need a special place with like these other elements too that you.
And there's certain places or certain treatment centers that mandate that.
Yeah,
you have to have this ticky box is checked.
Yeah, and this is where sometimes those conformed pieces are not the right approach either.
The bureaucracy is standing in the way.
It is, and there's so many systematic issues that prevent people from actually getting the treatment that they need. Yeah. And or families that are having to remortgage their home to pay for private treatment. Yeah. And then that creates another issue on top of an issue that's but they're so badly wanting to get the support and help for their family member. Or
but what happens if it takes 5 residential treatments times different ones to get it, and it's just like your house is already remortgaged and the parents are done with like, we've tried this, we've sacrificed everything,
and I mean, just like leaving an abusive relationship, getting clean or getting sober it can take up to 7 times. Like they've said that. Yeah. There's reports on it. And so.
And let's not shame people.
And exactly.
They're only at 2 or 3.
You don't know what they've been through, and you don't know what their trauma is. And yes, there's some, I agree wholeheartedly, there are some crappy people out there in the world. But at the same time, we also don't know what they've been through, what they grew up in, what abuses they went through themselves. Have they been sexually assaulted? Did they grow up in a gang life? Did they grow up, right? We don't know those pieces.
No.
So who are we?
Pain,
They're carrying pain, and who are we to judge those pieces
What's the classic? The opposite of addiction is connection.
Yes.
Right? And so that goes back to
that.
Yes.
What if treating the fire is looking at that rat park study? Okay, well, what if we just built our social reality in our communities like the rat park?
Yeah.
Then they wouldn't need to go to treatment at all because they wouldn't choose the cocaine, just like the rats didn't choose the cocaine water once they had that environment conducive to love, connection, belonging, play, the right kind of stimulation. They were no longer in that isolation.
So true housing first policies. I'm just using the buzzword, right? But
and
communities first, almost.
Communities too. So even with the rat park study, but they've also taken dementia patients and created little villages rather than keeping them, in a...
It's a subdivision.
Yeah. It's a gated community, and I think that's brilliant. They have little stores, so it keeps the normalcy of their life.
Got daycare centers where there's connection there with,
So for me, I think that it's so important that we realize that these connection pieces is a human thing that we all need.
Yeah, and loving each other.
And so, I mean, if we take anything from these studies, it's, you know, connectedness is what keeps us together, and it keeps us from having, you know, these trauma-bound reactions that, you know, we resort to, you know, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, you know, and the list goes on, right? Video games is a big one, and I think that we're going to continue to see that as a big surface in the future as well.
Deficit of health outcomes.
Yeah.
And livelihood outcomes. Well, I know that people will come to North America and be like, y'all are so depressing. Like, you're isolated, you're individualized. Like, they'll go back to their country like, y'all don't touch. Like, it's not normal to connect.
Yeah. Your men don't kiss each other?
There's a reason.
Like, or hold hands?
There's a reason. There's a reason there's depression. So that's actually not like a mental health illness. That's a natural response to a sick social structure.
Yeah.
Yeah. The social structure is sick. The people are just responding.
It's really interesting that you say this because kind of in December, my parents and I were having conversations kind of within the last year, and we're talking about kind of, they're in their 80s. You know, my mom's got Parkinson's, and just all the different scenarios. And this was coming to me from my healthcare background, right? Where all of a sudden a crisis happens, and you're scrambling, right, to kind of make different changes, and some of those changes can take wait lists of a year or longer.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, well, it totally makes sense to buy a big house, to have my, you know, parents and us move in together.
Yeah.
And like, holy crap. I mean, all my friends are kind of saying, oh yeah, are you helping out your parents and blah, blah, blah. I says, no, my dad's helping out me, you know, as far as staying on top of the lawn and shoveling snow 4 times a day. And like, it's not a, you know, it's not me helping them. It's actually a collective, right? And the social piece with regards to my mom, we would go 2 weeks without, you know, living in the same town, 2 weeks without seeing them.
Yeah.
Now it's just like she pops up the stairs and has a little 10-minute conversation or has a tea, and it's...
Yeah, that's more natural and well. And like, it's like that plane when it gets off track and we go, and all of a sudden it's tiny bit. That off trackness was that all-American dream.
Yeah.
And we went off.
Single, detached.
Yeah. And that you have to just be so proud of that, being that productive citizen that's part of, you know, capitalism and consumerism culture, that all-American dream.
But the circle of life teaches us.
So that's where we went off track. So it's not that hard.
No.
Actually, to bring us back, because it's what's the new value or the new story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the board game I've been working on, is to create a new story from that monopoly that we all have consumed and regurgitated, right, as a common social narrative. But what can be the new social narrative?
Yeah. And that's where, you know, bringing it back to, it's all about unteaching.
Yeah.
Because it's
old. Yeah.
It's, yeah. And a lot of what we are taught in today's society is very archaic and, you know, and not true to who we are and to who our ancestors are and what, you know, and what grounds us. And I think that's...
Yeah, we're social beings.
Yeah.
So is the healing center that Carrier Sekani is working on, is it going to create that community kind of feel?
That's the hope, right? Like that's, you know, that's what we're hoping to do. And I mean that it really brings down from Ormond Lake to, you know, Tachik, which will hopefully open up in December. Because it's already been pushed back. Yeah.
Okay.
So people get that experience, right? And they feel so fulfilled. Yeah. And there's like new neural pathways that form too, because all of a sudden you're like actually experiencing a wholeness that we're all meant to experience.
Yeah.
In that community setting. But then what? After exiting, and we all know this, right? After coming out of us,
what is the time frame?
Conducive feeling, then you come back into an individualized world. How does a person adjust?
Well, and I think this comes down to as well, right? When you tell people that they still have work to do outside of treatment, right? Because treatment is just, you know, that small maybe 2 or 3 pieces of the puzzle.
No, it's the start. It's the baby step.
It's the very beginning.
Yeah.
You still have years and years and years.
But what I'm saying is
putting that puzzle pieces together. And
from an organizational point of view,
the community feeling
what's the
of
community?
wholeness
Yeah.
is there.
yes.
Then they're back into an individualized
Yeah.
setting that there's no way to reshape society currently yet.
Well, and it's setting them up with success, right? So that's,
Bridging.
the bridging and continuing that, ensuring that they get that care, that they, are counseling, going to groups, connecting, with men's shed or with women's groups.
So they build community amongst their population.
You have to.
Well, I would definitely love to be part of that conversation, right? Because, within an Indigenous perspective, there is the Dudes Club.
Yes.
Right? And yet, I always think of continuity of care and choice, lots and lots of choice. So it's not.
And this is the thing is that, I'm always teaching clients, you have a choice to continue on this path or to make the choice to go back.
I think it's natural that they don't, though. I think we can admit that we're failing people in our society because they are now put back into that isolated rat cage.
Yeah, and that's where, and I think when we get to that point, it's really like banging your head on a brick wall and getting nowhere, right? We can say these things, but the systems need to change themselves.
So that's why we have to get involved in politics.
Exactly.
Well, I walk with many hats, right? So I do get a chance to talk and share to executive leadership of health authorities, policymakers all the time.
Yeah.
So I am in the languaging space of trying to figure it out because I do feel we can shift it. But we have to, at some point, we chose the All-American Dream together. And at some point, we can choose a new narrative together.
And this is exactly it. What is the American dream? Because the American dream that was of our, or was of the ancestors or the forefathers is not the American dream that I'm sure they...
And we have to remember, as Robin Williams says, Canadians are the little old lady apartment above the meth lab. And so one of the challenges is our proximity to our neighbors.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're always doing that comparison, or we're always kind of reactive. And now kind of with the tariffs and all of that, not that we're going to get political, but it's just we're having to kind of fight for our own autonomy and recognize the importance of our own autonomy. And in reality, the difference between Canadians and Americans on some things are the difference between Apples and Model T Fords. That's how dramatic a difference it is. And we have to celebrate that as Canadians. And we need to emphasize, for fear of being called communistic or whatever else, socialized healthcare, sharing resources. That's how a society gets healthy, is we care for one another collectively.
Yeah.
We share resources. We don't isolate people. And back to the kind of treatment, it's when somebody is not successful with treatment, we don't point the finger at them.
No,
it's okay,
that's natural.
We're missing another option. We need another support, or it's not their time to fully sober up.
They're not ready. It's
exactly the timing thing.
Yeah, they're not ready. They may say they're ready, but their actions show otherwise, right? And so
they're on the 5 to 7 year treatment path.
Yeah, and you just have to kind of respect that and say, okay, and keep hold space open for them too, and say, hey, you also have to set boundaries with them.
Yes.
Not let them walk all over you, because when they are in addiction, a lot of times they are angry. They are right. Not all of them. I shouldn't say that, but they're not in a place where they're fully engaged or ready.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you still need to hold space open for them so that when they are willing and ready, the door is there. And the door is open and not shut in their face, because that's the problem with so many of them, is that the door gets shut.
and
just because they acted out.
And social,
too, like they may have acted out of, aggressively or whatever, which is not okay. And you set that boundary.
That's pain.
But that's their pain talking too.
Literally the survival response.
And the survival response, when you are ready, please come back and see me.
And
today is not the day.
That's always having the back door, the side door open, and having it really clear and structured, right? I know, because I do some work with AWAC, is if somebody breaks the rules at the Olives branch, right? Mm-hmm. If you get caught drinking or drugging again, you're out for 3 months. And you can argue about the time frame, but there's still that boundary there, and it's consistently applied.
Yeah.
And there needs to be other resources as well, as far as what does the person do, if they've been there for 10 months and have had stability and have had connection and have done, some work, now what?
Yeah.
So there always needs to be kind of a roof over somebody's head. And safety, where they can kind of close the door and lock it. And I mean, that's where you and I kind of in our volunteering, with regards to the side plates that we have, which was part of my journey, from my burnout, is to actually help kind of that clientele.
Yeah.
Those extremely vulnerable
where
people.
The system is broken.
And so the curiosity, and I don't know if we want to...
I have a question quickly.
Sorry.
No, don't be. It's fine. It's just because you would know better than I about this, about why we can't have this. Because in terms of that lens of social equity and barriers, and when people are ready, and then they have to fill out paperwork. Oh, and now, like you said before, take a box. Well, you could do it this way, but then you won't be able to get in here, here, and here. So it limits your options.
Yeah.
But all of these elements of paperwork and now new testing, because this place doesn't have this. Why can't we have, my big question is, why can't we have a centralized system? They've already given their information. Like people with low executive functioning, it is so much of a reason why they give up is because of the paperwork a new organization wants again. Yeah.
And this is the 10th outreach worker from the 10th different agency.
Instead of having a centralized system where we all can access.
But why can't we? Is it legal? Is it that it's not secure? Someone could hack it? Like, why can't we have
It's the funding sources. It's the siloed funding sources.
And that
got to shift that.
Exactly. Well, and that's just it. And, talking about policy and change, this is something that policy and change needs to happen. We're doing a disservice to the people that we're supporting, because we're not really supporting them when we're asking them to open up and re-traumatizing them, again and again and again and again. And then we're wondering why they're not getting healthy. Well, that's part of the problem. And, in terms of the paperwork, there's so many of them that can't read or write.
Yeah.
No.
So then now we're creating so many more barriers for people than we ever have. And it frightens me.
Yeah. Well, some really interesting things, though, that was going on for a period of time. And I actually don't know what's going on now with Connective and the portables kind of at the end of Moccasin Flats, just because I'm not connected to that agency. But when AWAC was involved with the service hub and the warming center, right, there was a really interesting continuity of connection and wraparound care. There was nurses coming in a couple of times a week. There was an income assistance worker coming in, I think, once a week, to do those paperworks. There was the outreach staff that was kind of bridging. So it's like they go from this side of the building to, hey, I think you need to talk to so-and-so to kind of streamline, because we shared space with them, the men shared space, right? And so we saw the paperwork and all of that. And so there was staff there that were, trying to streamline that process with the residents.
Wraparound is everything, hey? Plus the warmth, sense of belonging, you matter and you're accepted here, just be you. Not, I'm going to stare, because if you look at someone with a pathology lens, they can feel it.
Yeah.
Because everything is a neural feedback loop, right? And we're co-regulating with everyone.
And I was always fascinated by the perception from the general public with regards to homeless people.
Yeah.
And then all the people that I knew providing service to those folks.
Yes, yeah.
And yes, I mean, there are more incidents of violence, and there was some really unfortunate things that had happened.
Yeah.
Kind of over the last three years, but when I talk to staff people like yourself or some of the outreach workers for AWAC, it's like, no, I'm not concerned about my safety. Like we create a structure, we make sure that there's.
For me, I'm more concerned about some of the clients' safety. Like that to me was a big piece.
Yeah.
Right. And especially for men and women that are incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah.
And, taken advantage of. And that to me was.
And because we're leading with our hearts.
With my, my safety.
It's the empathy. It's the connection. And it's like I think it's both the points in the sense of people know what you're leading with. People know that you're there to help them.
Yeah.
That you're feeding them, that you're giving a shit about their lives, that you're talking to them, that you're doing whatever you can within reason, within those kind of safe, healthy boundaries, in order to kind of provide that transition. So they feel your heart,
and your values, and
they're not gonna go with a baseball bat and whack you or stab you or shoot you.
No.
Like I don't think we've had any situation of if we did, we can't talk about it, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't recall any.
I mean, there still is kind of a burst of energy, and somebody could get assaulted from, or walk into a crack pipe smoke cloud.
I think for the most part, it's if you treat them with respect, they're generally going to treat you with respect.
Back to kindergarten.
Right? Like
treat people with the way
we
want to be treated.
Exactly. And so, I mean, if you're going to treat them constantly disrespectful, and I'm not talking about setting boundaries and being firm with those boundaries, but when you're constantly judging them, you're, talking to them aggressively yourself as a worker, then why are you in this field?
Or somebody peed in your cornflakes that morning, or you're burnt out. It's like time to
shift
cards.
Yeah, time to shift, and that's something we've both gone through burnout. We've all gone through burnout, and when we recognize that in ourselves, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a day off, or a couple weeks off. Depending on what my needs are at that point when it's already starting.
My joke with service providers is, how about we just start by working full time? Say no to overtime.
That's a good one.
Like seriously, let's start by just working full time.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to set that boundary for, because
it's a full time, and then you might have to let a few things fall off your side plate.
Yeah,
right.
And it's true, but we do tend to, and we end up with compassion fatigue. We end up with burnout. We end up with, stress beyond our, and that's not even including our personal everyday life stuff.
Isn't it interesting, right? 3 of the conditions that frontline responders deal with don't actually fit within the DSM, Diagnostical Statistical Manual.
Yeah.
Vicarious trauma, cumulative trauma, and compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
And so you see a psychiatrist and they can't even diagnose you with that.
Yeah.
You're going to have to actually see a therapist or a counselor who gets it.
Yeah.
But then they don't have the power within the system of human resources and WorkSafe and all those other insurance agencies to kind of say, okay, you really need to be off for 3 months. Let's start at 3 months. Because if your doctor doesn't say you should be off by 3 months, right? I mean, I've had clients that I've worked with, it's a 2-week thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't heal from compassion fatigue in 2 weeks chunks, because that's not even a long weekend in a stress.
Yeah. And this is, again, part of the broken system, right? And where things need to slowly change.
Yeah.
So from the client perspective, and I think, are we closing the circle now? Yeah. So the client perspective is that, I think it's good to remind people accessing services that they have a right to ask for trauma-informed practices and care. They have a right to say, hey, actually, I would like strength-based languaging. And you can say that And again, that boundaried woman thing, like from the last episode, sometimes they don't know how to approach
and that's
that.
the empowering
when
stuff.
There's this authority, this authority dichotomy that's perpetuated, which isn't true. They're not better than the person they're serving. They're co-regulating with and supporting, and they're creating an understanding together. But that a person can say, you know, that's not equitable for me, and this is why.
Yeah.
And that they have a right to ask for those things because those things are necessary for their care and approaches.
Yeah.
I agree.
Wow.
And in the justice system too.
Yeah, we could create a whole new world. The three people sitting in this room right now, will include Jonathan as well. We could totally create and solve some pretty significant social issues.
But it really comes down to having these conversations that we're having.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Advocating
the conversation
on the client basis, empowering them, making sure that they understand if they don't have the capacity or are in the place where they can do it, it's coming alongside them and standing up, you know, to the man, so to speak, the system, and advocate for them.
Yeah.
And we're going to get bruises on our forehead because we're going to hit the wall a few times.
That brick.
But we can't give up hope.
Well, we teach people through how we model and show how we want to be treated. Yeah. And then they go, oh, I have a right to also want to be treated that way.
Yeah.
And then we can get together.
And teaching them in a healthy way. Realigning
the power dynamics, abuse structure. And I mean, people don't intend to abuse by replicating, right, these systems of power, but they do inherently follow that violence. That's why it's called systemic violence.
Yeah.
And so when we equalize it out, everyone is sacred. Yeah. And when we look at humility, and what is humility? It's that I'm not better than or less than anyone, and neither is anyone else.
And at some point, we're going to be on the other side of the curtain, potentially, right? Yeah. There by the grace of God go I.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that our circumstances are never 100% set in stone. You know, we're all one situation or one, you know, accident or anything away from potentially being on the flip side. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about.
And the really scary thing is with our older population now, the homelessness
is increasing
with the aged.
Well, you want to talk about all-American dream failing people, right? Because if you consume that narrative and go, well, if I work and then I retire, I'm going to be set up because that's what the all-American dream told me. And now it's
cat food and live on
and
bread.
It's not. It failed people, and my heart breaks for those that are struggling because they're like, well, I did what the social narrative told me to do, and now I'm suffering.
But housing costs have doubled.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So we have shared humanity together. No matter what, we're all people.
No.
Yeah.
Well, we're all done that. Thank you, everyone, for listening in and connecting with us in our conversations, as dynamic as they can be. And I hope that there were seeds planted. I hope there were weeds plucked. And I hope that you nourish your garden every day. Thanks again.